Well, guys, I am the last speaker that separates you for more drinking and eating. So hopefully this won't be too painful, but I'm super happy to be here. Thanks for, sticking it out today. I know I've been to many of these conferences, and it can be quite exhausting, don't you think? It's like going from IoT to design management to this, but the talks have all been really, really great. So I'm going to talk about today, my current job is that I'm the Vice President of Experience Design at Autodesk. And I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes really talking about the journey that I've been on over the last 2.5 years, helping transform this very, very old desktop company into being much more customer-centric. But before I begin, I just kind of looking at the room, how many of you in this room actually work in very large corporations? How many? Oh, okay, I'm speaking to my people then. And how many of you work in smaller organizations? Okay, good, like a third of you. How many of you feel like in your organization, change is very slow and incredibly painful? Yeah. Okay. We should be drinking. This is like a really, I think every time I say the word change, I should be drinking beer. And by the end of the talk, it'll get very interesting. So you might want to challenge me on that, Hannes. How many of you feel like change is incredibly fast and painful in your organizations? One or two, but mostly. And how many of you are really super happy in your current situation? Okay, all right, there's a handful, but you put it up fast, but you kind of like took it down really fast. So maybe you're a little bit unsure. So as I mentioned, I joined Autodesk about, to be exact, 877 days ago. And how many of you are familiar with Autodesk? Autodesk is a software company that creates 3D software for people who make things. And the company was founded in 1982 with the invention of AutoCAD. And so it's an incredibly old company that has been rooted in traditional software development. Currently, there's about 9,000 employees worldwide. And at Autodesk, there's over 100 products in its product portfolio. When I joined Autodesk, it was about 140. And in its entire history, there has been one vice president of experience design. So that's me. So that sets the context a little bit. There are over 400 designers around the world working on Autodesk products. And of the 400 designers, they're located in 54 of 120 locations around the world. And at Autodesk, you have designers, it's completely decentralized. They could be reporting up into design managers, they could be reporting up into Scrum teams, Scrum masters, they could be reporting into product managers. It's all over the map, which creates a lot of complexity organizationally. So one of the good things about Autodesk, I think, if you're a change junkie like I am, everything about Autodesk is changing right now. First of all, Autodesk covers multiple industries. You have architecture, engineering, construction, manufacturing, and media and entertainments. And all of those industries are completely reinventing themselves and being disrupted. So lots of change. Also, the customer needs are changing. So as I mentioned, Autodesk is 35 years old. Many of their products are desktop, some are cloud, some are mobile enabled. But customers now are moving from this sort of desktop experience, which is you and desktop software, it's a one-to-one relationship, to being in a cloud environment where you're collaborating across multiple streams of work in multiple industries. So customers are expecting 24/7 access to their data any way they can in any platform. So that's a big, big shift for Autodesk. And then the other big thing is Autodesk is shifting from, again, traditional software where you sell a box to somebody. I always say, in traditional software, you sell somebody a box, and then you have a whole year to apologize to them, to resell to them. But it's moving, like many software products, and many companies are moving to a subscription model. So what does it mean when you have a subscription model? It means that your customers can renew every month. So because of that, it puts a lot of emphasis on customer experiences, because by nature, customers are less loyal when they're constantly renewing their subscription. So I joined Autodesk from Facebook. Prior to Facebook, I owned my own design studio for 15 years called Hot Studio. So I worked in an agency, I sold it to Facebook, and I got to work at Facebook for 2 years, and I was pretty happy at Facebook, but I was hired by this guy here. And the reason why I got hired by Autodesk and the reason why I left Facebook was because we met in a bar. His name is Amar. So I met Amar in a bar. It was planned. It wasn't serendipitous. And he basically said, we are a company that needs change agents. We need somebody really strong who can help drive culture change and help move this very, very old, stodgy company to be much more customer-centric, more customer-driven, and I think it's you. So I was like drunk and drinking the Kool-Aid at the same time. And so this guy, he was the SVP of product, and he worked for this guy, which was the CEO of Autodesk, Carl Bass. So between the two of them, I had executive design champions going in. And I realized that this is a complete gift for a design leader. Some people, is Russ here? I don't know where Russ is, but Russ talked about how important it was for you to make sure that you have executive support at the high level if you are a design leader, and it's completely true. So the conditions were really right for me because I had the CEO and the SVP who really supported me being hired and my role to be influential in a very, very old school company. So when I joined Autodesk, my boss, Amar from the bar, remember that, he asked me, so you're here, what are you going to do? And I was like, I have no idea. First of all, I'd never even worked in 3D before. So I said, give me 3 months. And like any design leader, like any of us in this room, and when I say design leader, I'm including engineers, I'm including product managers, I'm thinking about people who think about design. You have to treat all business problems as design problems. So I treated this 3-month process as a design problem that I needed to solve. And so what I did really was I went through what designers do is they go through a process of discovery. So I traveled all over the world and I decided, come on in, like within the 3 months, how many people could I possibly talk to? So that was my goal, is to talk to as many people as I possibly could in the organization. I talked to the interns, I talked to the VPs, I talked to the SVPs, I talked to product managers, I talked to QA people, I sat in kitchens, which really freaks people out because like VP is kind of a big deal, right? So here you have this VP in, I don't know, Shanghai sitting in the kitchen. And they're like, what are you doing here? So, but my job was to really meet and talk to as many people in different hierarchies and ask them some key questions. First of all, really trying to kind of knock down this sort of hierarchy of being a VP to whatever level they were. So I would sit and I would ask, tell me your story. And, it's like, first thing you need to do is ground yourself in being a human being, one human being talking to another human being. Tell me your story. And so they would tell me their story, they would let their guard down. And then the next question I would ask is, what keeps you up at night? So what is the thing, you know, you're in this company, you've been here, you might be here for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. What is the thing that is really, you know, upsetting you? Is it, you know, something in your job? Is it about the experience? Is it about a manager? But what is it that is really upsetting you? And then, what are your hopes and dreams? So that really opens people up, because now I'm getting them out of this space of reality and giving them an opportunity to be idealistic and to really say, well, my hope and dreams is the company goes here, or the stock price goes there, or I get promoted to Y. And then the last question that I would ask them is, how can I help you? Which always freaks them out, because they're not used to a leader of a company being, a leader typically has a command and control style. But here I'm turning it around and saying, no, 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 no. My job as leader is to be in service to you. How can I help you? How can I help you grow? How can I unlock a problem? And so I collected this mound of data over 3 months. And the key problems are not earth-shattering. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go through them, and I will probably see a lot of heads nodding, especially for those of you who work in large corporations. So the first one is, engineering-centric culture is focused completely on execution. You know, this is the way engineers are wired. They love to solve problems that are immediately in front of them. The more technical the problem, the better. But they are very, very focused on not necessarily strategy, but they're focused on executing what's right in front of them. That makes innovation very hard. The other one is, there was a complete lack of a design community. So again, and it's ironic because Autodesk is a company that designs, that creates software for designers in the 3D world, yet internally we lacked a complete culture of design. So a complete lack of culture centricity. Designers were all over the map. There was no way they can integrate physically or virtually, other than video conference, which usually always fails. And then we also heard this a lot today, a total imbalance of power of product teams. A very healthy product team has a trifecta of groups of people that should be treated as equals, that look at the problem uniquely differently. So you have a product manager, you have engineering, and you have designers. Now there are researchers, there are QA, but for the most part they fall into these categories. And a really healthy team is when those people can come to the table as a party of equals to solve problems. But like many companies, there's usually not enough designers. It's funny, there's never too many designers. There's usually not enough designers. The product managers may think that they're kings of the world, or the engineers are just solving problems in front of them, not really connecting the dots. So complete imbalance there. So people in design were feeling incredibly demotivated. And, you know, this is like a cardinal sin, which was that people who design products did not have direct access to their customers. I want to cry when I hear that. It's like, you know, it's like a friend of a friend of a friend told me that this customer pain point is X. That is not the way you ship products. So, you know, not only designers that didn't have access to customers, but engineers, product managers, sometimes they really took their feedback from sales teams who always have direct access to customers. And then this proliferation of shipping quantity over quality. You know, there's this false god, this false notion that the more shit that I could ship means the better product that I have. But the reality is, you know, quantity does not replace good quality experiences. It's sort of like going to a really disgusting, cheap buffet in an airport because you can eat a lot of food, when you can pick like a really beautiful, glorious meal that, you know, you could leave happy and full. So, that's just a false god when people run after quantity over quality. And then, how many of you feel silos really inhibit your ability to innovate? Some of you. Wow, I'm surprised. I'll talk to some of you later. But man, I think, silos are ways in which companies are organized. They're very efficient ways of organizing people. But what happens when you create silos is then you get these fiefdoms. You get these groups that naturally will compete against each other for attention. And so the silos really mean people kind of stay in their lane. There's no need for them to go outside of their swim lanes because they're going to be measured on their accomplishments within their own organization. So for me, my very first thing was we got to bust these silos. We got to adopt a federated model. So I really took an active approach to not self-identify in my own silo, but instead I reached across the aisle. And because I did this 3-month learning tour, I got to meet people in the different organizations, and I got to see the connections, the redundancies that people were doing across organizations. So I started building these sort of connective threads throughout the organization. And through all this, I was able to really adopt this model of inclusion. And it's, that's sort of step number one when you want to be a culture change person, is you give the voiceless a voice. And then they will be on your site, and they will be your relentless ally. So in order to move the company from product centricity, engineering, and to being more experience-centered, I collected all of the solution sets, if you will, and I put them into these really 4 operating principles. These are my guiding principles. And so since 3 months into Autodesk to today, I look at these as my organizing principles when we decide what's important, what's the next thing to work on. They usually fall into these categories. And so now I'm going to spend some time I'm going to talk about an example of a program that I've done in each 4 of these categories. There's been a lot of things that I've done over the last 2.5 years, but these are the ones. I don't have like 3 hours, but if you catch me in a bar later, I could tell you more. But these are the 4 that I'm going to share with you today. So the very first one is building community. And, if you looked at the 4, I forgot to mention that. So build community is on the bottom. Focus on customers, connecting experiences, and shipping quality. So I think of it more like a pyramid. You look at the community as the base. You can't really talk about shipping better quality products unless you fix the foundation, and the foundation is people, and the foundation is community. So that's the first thing that I spent a majority of my time, which was establishing what a design community could be. And there's a lot of different programs you can do virtually to connect communities. A cheap one way is using Slack. That easily connects people. I created an online site called Design Home, which is a place where all designers can go to get tools and learn about design and onboarding. But this example is the one that I'm kind of most proud of. And it really signified a turning point at Autodesk. So when I joined Autodesk, one of the things that Autodesk did for the engineering community every year was they would create a summit, a tech summit for engineers, to come together for 3 days of sharing and learning about what the latest software they're using, what the latest insights that they're doing. It was just sort of a way in which you can kind of quickly learn what's coming across the company from an engineering perspective in real time. So my boss, Amar, said, hey, by the way, I got some money. You should put this design summit together. And, but you have to spend the money in 4 months. I was like, okay, I've never thrown a conference. I've never designed a conference. So Hannes, I could give you some advice. But so I put together a conference in 4 months, and we called it the X Summit. Just 2 weeks ago, I just finished my 3rd X Summit. So it's an annual conference. It brings together 400 designers, 400 people from Autodesk. They're selected to come. Half of those people are designers. The other half are multidisciplinary. So we're not just talking to ourselves. It's a complete volunteer effort. So I don't have anybody assigned. So starting with building that inclusive, creating your coalition of the willing, those people will kind of jump up to help you be successful when they feel like they've been heard. So here is a quick video of the very first X Summit that happened about 4 months after I joined Autodesk. And is the audio working? Yes. All right, let's do it.
I just want to say one thing. I mean, huge props to you guys for putting this thing together. I mean, it's been an amazing couple of days. I know you know that. But the fact that you kind of did it by yourselves organically, sort of crowdsourced this whole event, this is fantastic.
I think you gathered all the extroverts who work at Autodesk. I've never been in a room with like 300 people who work at Autodesk that's this loud or this much fun.
Yeah. So it was a turning point, and people were like, whoa. As Carl Bass, who was the CEO of Autodesk, was like, oh my God, there's some extroverts at Autodesk. And it was this wake-up call, and it signified there was a change, and it brought this experience era into Autodesk. It really woke people up from their sleep, from their feeling of being demotivated, being on the bowels of the Scrum team, to get up and rise and to connect with each other. And the most wonderful thing is it wasn't just about designers, it was multidisciplinary. And people really started making connections where they had never made connections before. So that was building community. So now I'm going to talk about customers, focusing on customers. And as I mentioned earlier, there's never enough designers in companies, especially companies as traditional as Autodesk. A good healthy ratio, just for your records, is a good ratio in companies is to have 1 designer to about 6 to 8 engineers. And at Autodesk, it's usually like 1 to 15. So there's never enough designers who feel like they can ever really be doing a thorough or a good job. That is even worse when it comes to research at Autodesk. So, researchers are like what do you say when they're not an extinct animal, but they're on the endangered list. There's not enough researchers because, first of all, research doesn't neatly fit into an agile Scrum process. could, it does, but many times people don't see it. They think of it as unnecessary. They think about it as taking too much time. I had somebody who is who's now an SVP say to me, Maria, it's not, I love researchers, but I hired a researcher once, and they gave me a report 3 months later. I'm like, it sounds like you hired a really bad researcher. You can't like disown or disavow an entire discipline of people because somebody didn't do their job well. But that's typically what happens. So you're never going to have enough good researchers who they're, ideally that's the way you should have it. So then what's plan B, right? So plan B is train people to do research. And so that is one of the things that we've been doing at Autodesk is we've created a series of methods, research methods, both qualitative and quantitative methods, that we could then teach non-researchers to do. And so that helps us bring research to scale. And then how do we become scrappy? So a lot of the stuff that you're seeing, my techniques, are all really scrappy techniques. Yes, I did have a good budget for the X Summit, but for the most part, I don't have 400 designers report to me. I have to like get the coalition of the willing to dedicate their time to execute a program. So what do? We took advantage of the annual conference at Autodesk. So every year in Las Vegas, next month in November, they convene about 10,000 customers. And that's, it's sort of like Macworld, where they announce products, they have, they do tutorials, they have a 10,000 people coming. So we have this relationship to customers. So what we did was we trained a bunch of people prior to that event. And we created a space in the middle of the hall with just desks and goodwill. And we had tables, and we had sort of like a wanted list. We're looking for a mechanical engineer who uses Revit, at 3:30 on Monday. And so we had these tickets, and then people would take them and they would show up, and we would do on-the-spot research. And it could be anything from brand perception to usability studies. And over the course of the 3 days, we managed to speak to 100 people, 100 Autodesk people, managed to speak to 500 customers over the 3 days. And so then what we did after that, we collected all the data from those and we started elevating and saying, so what did you learn? What was the problem you were trying to solve? Who are you speaking to? And then we did our own sort of like bubble up and started to create themes. It could be like problems with collaboration, or it could be interoperability. But we found these themes that cut across multiple products, and then we would do global share-outs around those themes. So this is a good example of how you could get people to start focusing on customers, but establishing a low bar of entry. Okay, so we talked about building community, we talked about focusing on customers. The third one now is connecting experiences. So one of the things about Autodesk, I mentioned 120 products. Some are desktop, some are cloud, some are mobile enabled. And here's the thing, our customers don't use one of our products, they use several of our products in the course of their workflow. But Autodesk is a company built on acquisitions. So you can imagine we have all of these products that should be interoperable, but aren't. So it's like a nightmare for customers who are creating things, and they have to kind of like recreate them in a product that's technically Autodesk in a different context. So I always like to say there's a rich target at Autodesk from a user experience perspective. So so we started looking at what are the big, big threads that we need to solve that cut across multiple products. And we started, and we have tiger teams for that. But the one that I'm going to talk about today is what a few of the speakers talked about consistently, which is this idea of setting a design pattern library together. So we just launched our own one at the X Summit. My team did this as well. We spent a year putting it together. Now, over the course of several years at Autodesk, they have had attempts to do this and have failed. And I was tasked to do this. This was part of my job when I joined Autodesk, is you have to get a design system going. So you can imagine the skepticism across the company when I'm like, I'm putting a design system together, like, not again, or that'll never work. And also a lot of product teams aren't ready to give up their own ability to make their own decisions from a product perspective. So, you know, this was the first time ever in the history of Autodesk that we can now have the ability to deliver a cohesive experience across every product for all of our customers. So this is the first launch of the Human Interface Guidelines project, which we just, it still smells like new paint on the wall, this new design system. And there were a lot of detractors. The big thing about a design system is we learned a lot. So because they had multiple attempts, I also learned why they failed in the past. And one of the things about a design system that it will fail if you do not design it for engineers. So even though it's called a design system, it's a design pattern library, but it is a repository for design patterns and code base that are built in React components that you could grab from GitHub. So this system is both for designers and developers. There's multiple resources for both of those constituents. But the way one of the things I wanted to make sure when we put this design library together was we followed a really rigorous process. So the first thing we did, which we started in November last year, is we spent about 2 months doing a very, very detailed and thorough product audit. So it was like looking at 120 products and kind of cutting them up, like almost like a corpse, like cutting up all the components and kind of breaking them into pieces and putting them on the wall and starting to look at the underlying patterns. You also can see how we've reinvented the wheel over and over and over again. The same interactive pattern would show up in multiple products, but would look and feel and behave completely differently. So we did that, and that enabled us to understand the kinds of the kind of design system that we needed to create. The other thing is a completely open collaboration process. I didn't want to be pegged at Maria's team. They're in charge of the HIG. Let's watch that fail. It was completely open. I was like, you know what? This, just because our team is kind of the guardians of this, does not belong to any one team. Our job is to come up with a library that everybody can use. And so we made sure that people who were, especially the detractors, were heard. We made sure that, we constantly said, this is a work in progress. It's never done. If you don't like something, make it better. I always tell them, if you don't like this pattern, come up with a better solution, we'll adopt it. We also made sure that each component was validated by customers and by developers and designers across the company. So we made sure that we were able to check that box because Autodesk has so many different types of customers from different industries. It's really easy to say, well, it doesn't feel construction-y enough. It doesn't feel media and entertainment-y enough. You know, movie directors are never going to like this. So really vetted it and made sure that we can come up with something that can cover a broad swath of customers. The other one was constant stakeholder communication. So every month, I would send a newsletter to the CEO, the SVPs, and all of the major heads of products, people who own products. And I would chart our progress. And I would always, and I would also go and pitch, or I would do presentations around the Hague. It's coming. You know, enough where they're like, when is it going to be here already? Or it's never going to be here. But I made sure that I over-communicated every step of the way so our stakeholders were never surprised and that they can never say they weren't informed. And then finally, these kinds of pattern libraries, they're not just one and done patterns. They're really systems upon systems upon systems. So for designers, we created the patterns, but we also created the sketch files. And in the sketch files, we created taxonomy and layering so that when designers could pick these sketch files up, they would be consistent from sketch file to sketch file. We did the same thing for developers. We made sure that we created, the React component for those teams that aren't using React. Maybe they're using Angular or something else. We created what we called vanilla HTML, which was basically HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that they can use. And we put everything on GitHub. So we had these systems inside systems to support the Hague. Okay, we got building community, if you're following along, focusing on customers, connecting experience, and finally the last one is shipping quality. So whenever I talk about quality at Facebook, at Autodesk, I always go in the room and go, how many of you wake up every day and say, I can't wait to ship shitty work? You know, of course, everybody wants to ship quality. Of course, it's not something that you can't like say, you just totally suck. Your work sucks. Their work might suck, but maybe they are inhibited. Maybe there are things preventing them from shipping quality. So the number one thing that I felt like was the big inhibitor for people around shipping quality at Facebook. Autodesk. It's like when I do this to my husband all the time. It's terrible. Like sometimes I call him by an ex-boyfriend's name. I've been married him for 17 years. It's not a good move. I don't recommend it. Okay. So probably the big thing about quality is how do you define quality? So how do I even know whether I've hit the quality bar at Autodesk? So the very first thing that I set out to do was to ask the question, do product teams know when it's good enough to ship? How do they know? How do they know when they can press the launch button? And also to also impart on people that it's everyone's responsibility at Autodesk to create things that people will love. Now, that's a big culture change in a company that's rooted in enterprise software. The world between enterprise and consumer is a dotted line now. There's no such thing. People live and work in all different ways, and the expectations for enterprise software are as equally high as it means to have a consumer product. So getting people to aspire to lovable was a big challenge. And so I did present a whole bunch of scary data to people that was specific around Autodesk, in terms of, the cost of product defects on our customers, and how it has an impact on sentiment, how it prevents them from getting their work done. And the thing, when you are working on products where they're using software that's their livelihood, if a product goes down, they are losing time and money. and could even get fired when the products are defective. So putting all that data. But this other one I also want to remind people, because it's easy to fall into, and I'm sure you've all heard this, let's just put it out there, we'll fix it later. How many of you have heard that? Right? Yeah, you know what happens. What happens? Never gets, it's like the junk drawer. All of the quality stuff, what I call UX debt, it gets like hidden on the junk drawer with all the dust bunnies, right? So, but what happens is when we ship bad products, it increases sentiment. And I say you don't even know it, but you are paying the trust tax. Because the studies show that if it takes 3 times longer for people to get over a bad experience than a positive one. And when when you ship good experiences, people are 12 times more likely to buy a product. They're 6 times more likely to recommend a product. And they're 3 times more likely to forgive a mistake if you have set them up for success. But when you set up the trust tax, you as human beings, what happens when your trust is violated? It takes a long time to get back into trusting somebody again. Same thing is true with products. So how do you know when something's good enough to ship? How might we build quality experiences for our customers? How do we find this balance between like the competing priorities? The thing is, on products, you always will have time constraints, you will always have resource constraints, and you will always have scope constraints because you have to ship something. You can't wait 3 months, 6 months, a year to ship anything. You have to continuously ship. So how do you establish that quality bar and continuously ship when you are constantly balancing these constraints that prevent you from doing so? So what we did was we came up with what I call the hierarchy of quality at Autodesk. So this is what it is. And I recruited people from QA, I recruited engineers, I recruited designers, I looked at their wiki files, I asked how they define their definition of done. People had checklists, people had stuff all over the place. So I didn't have a blank canvas to start from. And there's plenty of things out there in the wild that you can look at for inspiration. But looking at all that, I wanted to come up with a 20-question checklist, no more, no less, that becomes the hierarchy of quality. So the very first one, kind of again, starting from the bottom, is resilience. Like, making sure your product is stable. When you click that icon, the product should go on and not crash. It should be secure. There should be privacy. You should make sure that the data is that people's data is protected. So there's all of this stuff that, falls under the sort of the foundation of quality, which is resiliency. Typically engineers love to work here, right? They love to sit in this quadrant. Now, going up is valuable. How do you know if you're truly creating something that's completely valuable for the customer? What kind of data are you pulling from to say that is in something that a customer needed, whether they were explicit or implicit? Is it when you're creating something, and I've heard this before, this happens at Autodesk quite a bit, which is it's going to be valuable in about 6 months to a year, so we're going to launch it now. If it's not immediately valuable to people, it's a complete waste of time and it's just noise. So why don't you wait to actually make it much more robust when it really truly is valuable instead of half-assed, so that a customer can have a good experience. So value is an area where product managers tend to lay claim, right? It's my job to determine whether something's valuable. Then moving up there is where we designers love to sit in, which is usability, right? So are we creating things that are human? Do they sound human and not like a robot? Are they intuitive? Are they consistent? Have we removed the friction from the system? This is where we love to sit. And then finally, lovable is where we all aspire to be, which is it's how you go from good to great. It's those little things those little touches that make something incredibly high quality. It's those little touches that really connect to us emotionally as people. So that is where lovable comes in. And so if I had to flatten this out, and I would say, the world of MVP, where I hate that term so much because it's a term that people abuse, right? It's as bad as quality as a name, frankly. And so MVP typically lies here, right? You can, you make it resilient, you make it valuable, but you may make it a tad usable, but it's an MVP, right? And so that's where the baseline is. And where we really need to go is really, and then if I was grading a product, because somebody asked me about that, well, if you were to grade a product, A, B, C, or D, I would say you get a D if all you do is make it stable. You get a C if you're valuable. You get a B if you're usable. And that's where good products tend to stop. They stop at usable. But to truly get to an A, to truly be a great product, you have to get to lovable. So instead of cutting your time and resources and scope from there, you really need to take a slice of the pie based on your time and budget and your scope, right? So, if you have a 2-week Scrum cycle, instead of just focusing on the resiliency, how can we make the thing that we're going to expose to customers great? Let's just do less better. So this is what shipping quality. So this was rolled out a few months ago, and it's not actionable yet. But it's the first step to really define the what. The next step is to define the how and measure. How do you know you're successful? If you are a PM, these are the things that you need. These are how you, as your job, can reflect what you need to do in order to ship quality. And then these are the metrics of success that you need to look at to make sure that you've been successful. So this is step A. Watch this space when we roll out some more things about quality. So, build community, focus on customers, connect experiences, and shipping quality. So, these are my pillars. I'm still working with them. Have I been successful? It really depends on who you talk to. So I feel like when I look around and I think of the conversations that are happening at Autodesk, it's starting to work. I have seen a big culture shift. I think that we're starting to listen to one another better and collaborate better. I think we're listening to our customers better. And I feel like design is starting to permeate the culture, but we have a ways to go. So when you're a culture person, day one, Amar in the bar, sign on the dotted line, I'm going to be that culture agent. When you start a company, you think you're starting there, you got your plan, and you're going to sprint up that hill and you're going to reach nirvana. Well, it doesn't really work that way, does it? Right? You don't really work this way. What really happens is you go up and down. And change is really hard and it's really messy. So you have to be prepared for the ebbs and flows and the pain that comes with change. So there's this great book by Seth Godin called The Dip, which I read. And it talks about, as you're in a company, you have these peaks and you have these valleys. And when you hit the dip, when you hit the valley, and you hit it really hard, because if you are a change agent, you will. There are 3 things you can do. 1, you can fight through it. You can, you can get beaten down by your detractors, you pick yourself up, and you plow forward, right? You can do that. You could also have the option to quit, right? This is too hard, this isn't going to change anything, the detractors are going to win, and that is an option. But what Seth Godin says is that people tend to quit prematurely. So if you're going to quit, be really clear why you're quitting. Or you could stay and be mediocre, which a lot of people in corporations do, right? They hide under a rock for a year, they wait for the next reorg, and you're back out, which is, again, a viable solution. These are all the ways you can survive the dip. So how you can survive the dips, right? If you choose to stay and choose to fight, the first thing is to make sure that your work is highly visible. Right? You always want to make sure that you are not that person that, and it's very easy for stakeholders to say, she's a designer, she takes too long to do things, she's always in the clouds, she never gets anything done. Screw that, here's a list of things that I've done, and here's the impact that I've had. You're always making your work visible, you're always staying visible. And then quantify, measure your successes, and own up to your failures, because failure is a way of learning. So, detractors love when you fail. So you own it, go, yeah, but here's what I learned, and here's how I'm moving on. Make sure your work aligns to business goals. Pretty clear cut. Give credit. So a big part of my job is I don't take the credit, and because I have a volunteer army, I put the credit on people, which makes them want to work harder. And especially those detractors, I always give them credit. So making them look good, aligning to their goals, is a strategy to keep you surviving the dips. And then be committed to change, especially when it gets hard, because it will get hard. This isn't the fun road. It's easy to say, I'm a change agent. It is really hard. There are lots of crying in your drinks at night and saying, why am I still here? So, change is hard, it's messy, and in some cases, it might not be worth the fight. But if you believe that change is worth fighting for, be proactive. Find your coalition of the willing. Be persistent, and find that motivation to keep going, even when it gets hard. So, with that, I'll leave you with a quote from Gandhi, and you are this much closer to drinking. I thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks.